What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Josh, the Screen Gazer, back at it again talking about another movie. I know I hinted in the last movie review that I did about Neighborhood Watch that I'm going to be covering a Ben Affleck movie. And this movie that I'm going to be covering is The Town. Now, I wanted to watch this movie before I watched The Rip, not because they have any correlation, but they both have, same director producers in Ben Affleck. The Town came out in 2010, starring Ben Affleck, Rebecca Hall, Blake Lively, Jeremy Renner, John Hamm, others as well. So a pretty stacked cast. Ben Affleck is the director. Ben Affleck, you should know him from Good Will Hunting with Matt Damon. He's also directed other movies like Academy Award winning Argo and also Air that recently came out in 2023. The intro gives kind of the audience a glimpse of how problematic living in Charleston that is. A lot of his films like Good Will Hunting and stuff like that do stem from living in that Massachusetts Boston area. Jeremy Renner's character is kind of the hothead of the group. Also, Ben Affleck's main character Doug is his best friend. Chris, who is Blake Lively's character, is kind of that bad influence love interest of Doug, Ben Affleck's character. And it seems like they have a kid, which was the most confusing part because they insinuate, like the whole neighborhood insinuates, like, oh, they've been together like most of their life, so the kid must be his. But Ben's character Doug insinuates that that's not his kid, which is kind of interesting, which I'll dive into later. And then the FBI agent Adam Frawley, John Hamm's character, is going after the crew, and the whole point of this movie is Doug and Jem's crew are robbers. They're thieves. They rob banks and trucks, like armored trucks, and then they have a big job at the end. But we'll get into that. Claire, who Rebecca Hall's character, is a hostage slash love interest for Doug. So it starts with Doug and Jem robbing a bank, and Rebecca Hall is one of the managers there. And then they kind of threaten her, like, if you squeal, then we'll kill you and all that. And then eventually, Doug stalks Claire to make sure she doesn't like say anything to the FBI, but then eventually it leads to them actually falling in love, which obviously is problematic. Then obviously Doug McCrae, who is the main character, Ben Affleck's character, is the centerpiece of the story, and the whole point of this movie is kind of battling with living in one area and letting that area and your experience in that area define who you are. They obviously flash back to, or not flashback like actual images, but they talk about Doug's background about how his mom left him, and he tells this to Claire, Rebecca Hall's character. He talks about how his dad is actually lives in the suburbs, but he actually is in jail, and that his mom left, and then later he finds out that his mom was actually a druggie and killed herself by hanging herself from a wire, which was very graphic because of Doug's dad's character kind of like wanted out of the game, similar to Doug, and then the guy he was working for put Doug's mom onto drugs, oxy, which led her to kill herself. So it's kind of like a roundabout story saying you can't break the cycle of steps that you're following behind your dad. Also, as well as this is where you live. You can't be different. This is who you are. But Doug is trying to fight that. But eventually, Doug and Claire do end up falling for each other, leading to the FBI then thinking that she's an accomplice, obviously problematic. And then Claire eventually finds out the truth, which leads to a whole cascade of dominoes falling, especially for Doug, because then Chris, that love interest that he had, who he's no longer with, finds out, and then she tattletales on the FBI, and then creates this whole thing. Because since Doug wants to leave, like he wants to be done with the game, he finally goes on one big score to get a lot of money, and then take him, himself, Doug, and Claire's character, and just leave and never come back. But eventually, it leads to them all perishing except for Doug, and Doug surviving and finally leaving, but not taking any of the money with him, which was interesting because he's like, I'm done with being like obsessed with the material stuff, and I just want to be free of all this. I want to be a new man, similar to like, how they were using Doug's story about his mom kind of as influence of like Doug also wants to leave just like his mom, but Doug's mom didn't get the happy ending story. She actually got hooked on oxy, and then kind of like Chris, his past love interest. And it's unfortunate, but I thought they did it very well in how they story told it. But it's a very depressing story, especially with the kind of innuendo that Chris's daughter Shine might be Doug's daughter, but we don't know that. So is he also like his mother in that way, where he wants to leave that family behind to start a new life? It's kind of messed up, and it's not really a lot of happy endings. The only happy ending, I guess, would be for Claire, even though she was traumatized finding out that the robbers who like took her hostage, one of them she fell in love with, and but then in the end she at least got like $1 million plus, and Doug got nothing except for like his freedom, even though leaving his possible daughter behind. All the characters were kind of messed up in the end, but the whole movie plays with that sort of aspect of family traditions and your upbringing and how much that defines you. But does it really? That's the question they kind of pose. Like, can you break free from the chains of, the society that you live in? Can you be different? Can you not let that influence, or maybe let it influence you, or you take those, aspects that you learned, but not make you who, the streets want you to be? I think I'd rate this probably an 8 out of 10 as well. But I think the action was good. If you love action, drama was good. It's not a happy movie by all means. Um, Except you can decipher for yourself if you feel like some of these endings were happy, even though some of them were kind of like left to your own interpretation. But I think Ben Affleck directing this and acting in it, I think he did a very good job. And the next movie I'll be talking about will be another Ben Affleck movie, a new recent one. I think y'all know the movie that I'll be talking about next. But that's all I got for y'all, and I'll see y'all in the next one.